as we bring in our hockey insider, Frank Seravalli. Just fresh.
Wow.
That new trade smell still around this one.
It's still
what do you
digesting.
Again, we're learning about LeChance. We don't know much about the other prospects. It's a St. Louis pick, but it's still a second. I guess it's Trent Frederic leaving Boston. Like, we all kind of like the player. He's got some stink to his game. He plays hard. He was, you know what he was? He was a good Bruin. Yeah. And I feel like he'll be a good Oiler. But is this what the Oilers needed? It feels like maybe, again, they've gone to the forward well when maybe there's some glaring holes. Not glaring. There's maybe
need elsewhere?
Issues somewhere else. Yeah.
So you would have Rhett played against his old man, Scott LeChance.
Yeah.
So,
but is it LeChance?
Yeah, in Canada, LeChance. America, chance.
You just
Why don't you take us over, Frank? You got to let us know how to pronounce these things.
Well, considering they're all from the U.S., I'd say we're pretty good with LeChance. So so look, here's the interesting part about this deal for the Oilers. One, I think it solves a need. They needed someone with size and a little bit of a different element, and someone that could skate. So they bring that in, and now they haven't touched any of their two other avenues to make another deal. One, we don't have a determination yet on Evander Kane because both the Bruins and the Devils retained money. It actually only chews up $500 and some thousand bucks. They had $1 million in cap space, so they don't need to go. They didn't touch the LTIR money yet for Kane. And two, if they wanted to, and they don't want to do something with Kane, they could still trade a piece off of their roster, dollar in, dollar out, and make something happen that way. So this hasn't closed off any avenues. And even further than that, there's a thought out there that depending on how long Trent Frederic is out, which is week to week, could he be on LTIR for the rest of the season potentially, and then activate him for the playoffs? I think that's a bit of a long shot, but the point is the Oilers made an improvement and kept their powder dry for some other things, except for the assets that are out the door, the second, the fourth, and LeChance.
So get us up to speed on Kane, because I know people are saying, oh, he's been hurt and he's going to get healthy at some point, but it gets more interesting than that because he just lost some trade protection to a lower level. He seemingly wants to get some games in before the playoffs, and they probably want to game the system and use the LTIR space.
Well, I think they would do that if they had a player that they were comfortable in knowing that he would be a willing participant in that.
Right.
And there's no bigger wild card in the NHL than Evander Kane. So I don't think they feel real comfortable about the situation. If they go through this process and trade Evander Kane's LTIR money, what happens if he wakes up on March 27th and he says, you know what? I feel like $5.1 million today. I'm going to play. I want to play. And I'm going to find a doctor, second opinion, whatever it might be, that's going to clear me to play.
Yeah.
Well, if the Oilers went out and spent that money, then now what? You've got to make a trade post-trade deadline and attach first-round picks and trade, just for math's sake, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins off of your team just because Evander Kane has woken up and decided that he's going to push your buttons today and he wants to play.
Sounds like a good team guy.
Sounds like a guy that's been around out of Buffalo, Winnipeg, and San Jose. But
we could use it.
Right. And so if you're going to move Kane, which we're sort of circling around that being a potential, he's owed over $5 for 1 more year. Is that an asset you get something back for, or is that something you have to staple an asset to get rid of?
It's an asset, given what everyone knows what you want to do. You have to staple an asset to in order to move, which again just further complicates things for the Oilers. Do you really want to pay to move him when, if he does come back, whether it's regular season or playoffs, the guy could actually be a huge difference maker for you and exactly what you need if you're the Oilers on the ice.
Or injured the first game back. It's a wild card, isn't it?
This doesn't sound managed well. Like going back to the offseason.
Well, and they're
we need a guy that can skate and has size.
That was Holloway. That's a guy that can skate and has size.
Skinner? Let's get Skinner. Makes no sense. And I'm happy for it. Go Oilers.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You got some breaking news, Frank? What are you looking at here?
Yeah, so the Montreal Canadiens have agreed with Jake Evans on a 4-year extension. That takes the number 4 player off of my trade targets board. 4 times $2.85 million bucks the team has just announced.
4
Jake
times
the Snake.
2.85. Look at Frank go. This is amazing.
Attaboy, Frankie boy. I didn't realize that that Frederic was injured. Obviously, I didn't know he was going to be traded today either. But it's another guy. It's not as much in terms of salary saving, but if you can LTIR this guy.
Well, you wouldn't have eaten all that salary if you're just going to LTIR him, though, would you have? I don't know. Maybe you had to get in. It's with Kane's situation is confusing.
They have to leave themselves some wiggle room to get some other deals done, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't get the salary and then all of a sudden a goalie deal, what is there a goalie deal for the Oilers to make out there? It seems like John Gibson's name has kind of risen to the top of that list, and I apologize because I know you're feverishly tweeting and
look,
getting
I
stuff out there, but
I don't see John Gibson as a fit anywhere. One, I think there's a super limited market and he makes too much. And for whatever reason, the Ducks, this is why he's still there, have been hell-bent on thinking they're going to get something in return for him.
Right.
I don't see it. I certainly don't. For all the reasons we just talked about in Edmonton, I definitely don't see it there. The only other team I think that's somewhat interested in a goalie is Carolina, and only for cheap. They don't spend on a goalie as a free agent. They're certainly not going to pay assets and then take on this cap hit from Anaheim in order to do it. So I don't even have John Gibson on my trade board because I just don't think he's an authentic candidate to move. It's the same reason why I took off Ivan Provorov in Columbus with their playoff push and go through. There's some guys that just don't make any sense.
looking at your trade board, you've got Brock Nelson at number 1. He's 33, pending UFA. Winnipeg has been tied to this guy. It seems like he also feels like the kind of guy that Winnipeg goes for every year, and it doesn't get them over the hump. Whether it's
Dasney, Monahan, Toffoli, the older veteran guys,
center.
Yeah,
Kevin.
Tall center with prematurely graying hair. Which, yes,
it's your boy.
Yes,
yeah.
I
feel bad for him. He's been attacked. Suddenly, people have been doing instead of me sized up next to Sidney Crosby, and these guys are the same age. It has been Brock Nelson.
He's getting politely compensated for that pain, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Unlike me, yeah.
What is Brock Nelson?
I was going to say, if he's number 1 on your trade board, I'm guessing the factors and the elements that you put into putting him there is the potential impact he could have for the team that acquires him. What's he got left at 33 years of age, and what does it take to get this guy out of New York?
I think he's got a lot left. I was very pleasantly surprised with Brock Nelson's play. I know you could look at the lack of points at Four Nations face-off, but if you go back and watch that championship game again, third period and OT gave them massive minutes in tough matchups and really held up his end of the bargain well. So I was impressed with Brock Nelson. I think he's the premier rental center available. He's, again, you might say, what does he have left in the tank? I went and did a deep dive on his game. I watched every shift that he's played this year so far at the time I wrote the story in January. And this is a guy that his numbers have plummeted, but it's because the Islanders' power play sucks. It's not because he's playing any different or doing anything different. Kyle Palmieri's taken the same hit on his overall numbers. Watch the games, watch the even strength production. He's doing the same thing that he's always done in his whole career, but his numbers are down 20%, not because he's 33 turning 34. It's because the Islanders can't score a goal to save their lives on the power play, and their special teams as a whole stink. So I think he's a very attractive second line center option. And I think he's a tremendous fit in Winnipeg because the big thing of all the names that you just mentioned, it's not that they struggle to acquire these guys. It's that they struggle to keep them. They come in and then they're out because they don't want to re-sign. I think Nelson is a unique candidate because I've made this point a few times. War Road, Minnesota is closer to Winnipeg than it is to St. Paul where the Wild play. If you're going to have an opportunity to sign a guy like that with a team that's in the contending mix, close to home is a good bet.
And so for the Islanders, Nelson, it looks like there's a lot of teams for them to pass. Tough loss to the Rangers, I want to say last night or 2 nights ago. But Palmieri's another UFA. You got him in your top 10. It sounds like, it's going to be the summer. They got to decide whether they want to keep Noah Dobson long-term or not. Where are you at on the Islanders? Because they're holding a couple of your chips in the top 10.
Where I'm at on the Islanders is make the deal. If Brock Nelson is a New York Islander on Saturday morning when he wakes up, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, Lou Lamoriello should be fired on the spot. You don't need to come to work on Saturday. It's malfeasance and negligence keeping this guy. If you want to re-sign him so bad, wait till July 1st, get what you can for him and bring him back. 22 games or whatever it is in another team's uniform isn't going to make or break him, but not having those assets in a lost year for the Islanders with a bleak future and not enough star power, high-end skill, or difference makers, the Islanders are pretending if they think that signing two 33-year-old pending UFAs is going to help them moving forward. Absolutely pretending.
There's some gray beards
big time,
in literally and figuratively, and it's an aging core, and it has been for a while. Number 6, number 7, Casey Middlestat at 6. Bowen Byram at 7. Oddly, they were traded for one another. Middlestat 26, Byram 23. Buffalo, not a playoff team. Colorado is. I guess I'm just curious, is Colorado, are they content with their depth at center that they would move on from Middlestat? What do they need in a Middlestat deal? And for Buffalo, why are we moving Bowen Byram, I suppose?
Well, I'll start with Byram because it's the same reason why JJ Peterka and Dylan Cousins and a few other guys are on our list. I don't think anyone's happy there. And this has gone on a long time now, 14 straight years without the playoffs and really no path forward to get there. And look, Byram, they had an opportunity after trading for him to sign him to a longer term deal last summer. When that didn't happen, certainly, perked up my eyebrows to think, okay, what's the game plan here? Why hasn't he agreed to a longer term deal if he was such a good fit for your team? So teams have been calling, they've been asking. And in Colorado, these two players traded for each other. It hasn't been a perfect fit for Middlestat. They really, I think, have been perplexed at his lack of consistency. He hasn't shown the high-end offensive upside that they thought they might be able to unlock. And for teams that are interested, he's got some cost certainty at $5+ million for the next couple seasons that there's been enough teams that at his age still think that they can get there and do that. So he hasn't been an ideal 2C candidate. I wouldn't be shocked to see Colorado hang on to him. Same thing with Byram. Wait until the summer. There's no gun to your head to make a deal with these guys right now, but they're certainly on teams' radar and teams are reacting to it.
And so to follow up on Boom's thing, can they win a cup with him as their 2C?
I think they could. I mean, so much of it is going to hinge on McKinnon and that line and how it produces. They've been longing for more depth. Colorado, to me, took a step in the right direction, bringing in Lindgren, but their defense still needs a lot of work. Josh Manson has been banged up. He hasn't played well when he's been in the lineup. And if they can kind of move off from the Malinskis and the Keaton Middletons and the guys on their back end that really have, I think, in a lot of ways hurt this team this season, they're going to be better off. It's not a have to trade Middlestat. It's just a, can you get a better fit? And it's going to always be difficult to do that in season.
We kicked it around yesterday. There was, it was something you had retweeted. The Flames maybe sniffing around Brandon Carlo out of Boston, who are looking like they're sellers right now. I guess thoughts on the player, and is that a fit that makes sense for the Flames? Some think that it does, and others are skeptical.
I think it makes sense. And is he a fit? Of course. I think anyone that defends the way that he does, I think, and it's a very reasonable cap hit. He's a giant of a man, someone that has played in really competitive moments and been a big part of this Bruins team for the last while as one of the longer tenured guys. I think from Boston's perspective, they're open to a lot of different things because they have overspent and they have a lot committed to their defense, and they're trying to find different avenues to create new flexibility. That there's been enough interest from teams that, hey, make us an offer, make our team better, give us some value back in return, and provide us with that flexibility that I think would certainly be intriguing. Carlo isn't, he's not one of those guys that I think screams to me when thinking of Calgary that he fits their age schemes, so to speak, which is what you've heard Craig Conroy talk about so frequently. But I mean, I think there's a real clear need for the Flames on their defense. The fact that they've gotten what they've gotten, or I guess have gotten to this point and are in the playoff mix, and Dustin Wolf has played as well as he has with the third pair that they continue to trot out, I think to me is a pretty fascinating story.
Well, and so what would Boston want? Because if you're telling me they're selling, they probably want young assets. That's where I have a tough time with this one.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It doesn't feel like it's the right time in your life cycle to be giving up, let's say, a first or a young prospect. Those are the things you're trying to collect right now. If you're Craig Conroy,
I agree with you. I would say that for this particular player, you wouldn't want to be giving up a ton of futures. Is there a roster player that Boston's interested in? And if not, go to the next guy on your list.
Sure. It's the kind of thing with a few of these three. We've talked about Dylan Cousins. I mean, the Sabres would be wanting what the Flames are probably loath to give up, which would be either high draft picks or young potential top line players. So, and you could argue whether the Flames have that or not. I think it was last week. I'm trying to catch, today's Tuesday. Vancouver reportedly offering Brock Boeser a contract extension, to which he was, I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off. Does that put Boeser in the mix? I know you've got him at 12, but they're still kind of right there as we get closer to deadline day.
He's a little bit of Vandalay Industries right now. Importer, exporter. Like,
that's right.
Could be both. Importer, exporter of fine latex goods.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. And when I say this, it always sounds like, hey, congratulations, buddy. You just outlined all of the options. So he wants to be a Vancouver Canuck. And he's a little bit bothered and perturbed that it's gone on this long and that they essentially dared him this season. Hey, you scored 40 last year. Congratulations. But we want to see if you can actually do that again. And he's on track for 28. He's missed 7 games. And it's actually a slight tick above his career average. So they presented earlier this year a 5x8 offer, and $40 million is certainly nothing to sneeze at. But he believes that with the cap, and his camp believes that with the cap going up, he's in a good spot to cash in with potentially more years on the open market, 6 or a 7-year deal. At the same time, the Canucks are in this conundrum where they're going, should we stretch? Like, the $8 million isn't the problem because he's already making $665. It's not a huge jump from $665 to $8. Mm-hmm. But are we comfortable giving the 6th or 7th year? That's what is the pinch between their shoulder blades. And they're trying to figure that out. They're going to make their best offer tomorrow or today or whenever it is this week before the deadline. And if they can't, and it's a hard no, do the Canucks care about this playoff chase, or is it more intriguing to them to get the value of Brock Boeser? Or could they kind of keep him for the playoff chase and then revisit those talks again as you get closer to free agency for a guy that I think in the end really doesn't want to leave, but the longer this has gone on is like, well, not only have you not necessarily treated me that well in terms of these offers and the negotiation, but it's also been a circus around here this year with Miller and Pettersson. And by the way, what happens to Rick Tocchet in his future, that I think there's a lot to consider on both sides. Boeser has just kind of sat back and has said, hey, I'm good either way. Either I'm getting 6 or 7 years on the market at that number, or you can pay me here to stay.
Yeah, it feels like a real major dice roll for me if Jim Rutherford's going to walk him past Friday, because look, why isn't he scoring a ton of this year? Well, how have the centers been there? Like, you traded JT Miller. Elias Pettersson's been brutal. He's not a perfect player, but he does what people pay for in this league. And if he's looking around, it's kind of looking like smoldering rubble right now with what's going on in the room and the departure of guys, statuses all of a sudden of Quinn Hughes and Thatcher Demko coming up. Like, I wouldn't walk this guy past Friday. I'd go get some assets.
But let me look at this from another perspective for the exact reason you mentioned, which is, okay, Miller's out the door. We don't know what's happening with Pettersson. If the Canucks have any plans to be a competitive team, who are you going to replace Boeser with to score you 28 or 30 goals next season?
Yeah.
Where's that guy going to come from?
Yeah, the whole thing falls apart if Pettersson's not a good player. That's really the.
What do you mean if he's not a good player? He hasn't been a good player for 15 months now.
Yeah, but now that you've traded JT Miller, you can't be a playoff team a win away from knocking off the Oilers, right? Like it's now even more important that
that would lend me to exactly what I'm saying in my argument, which is you got to keep Boeser. Give him the 6th or 7th year. Who cares? Let the next regime figure that part out. $8 million a year is in the ballpark.
Yeah.
If you have any designs on being competitive, you're further away with Boeser gone. Same conversation with Brad Marchand in Boston. You could get the value if you want, but the Bruins don't punt on seasons. How are you going to get back to being a good team, a team that's on the rails, if Brad Marchand, not just your captain, but a pivotal, guy driving the bus for your team, isn't part of it?
Is Marchand what's his status now that he's on the
Week
IR?
to week?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's how many weeks left in the season? Like
he's
17 is the last day of the year. That's what, 5.5, 6 weeks out.
He's a candidate to be traded for sure. I don't think the injury necessarily halts that. I think it just adds another layer of complication to it. But I'd imagine not all that dissimilar to Boeser. The Bruins are probably making their best and final like today or tomorrow to say, here's the situation. You either want it and you're going to take the relative hometown discount, or if not, be that as it may, and prepare potentially that you could be on the move.
If I'm Brad Marchand, I don't think that's a very good team. I don't love the way they've operated in the last offseason. Lindholm, not a good signing. Were you paying attention? Zadorov, not a good signing. Were you paying attention? Swayman, you're a really important goalie. Yeah, you let that go as long as it did. It's not a max term thing. Like, he's deep into his 30s here. He's going to get more money and he can go find a better team. Like, he has to really want to be a one jersey player to stay there, doesn't he?
I don't know. I mean, let me take the alternative view from Pinder, which I feel like I live my life on the alternative side of the planet.
Probably good.
Love you, buddy. I would say Swayman had a bad year. Is he likely to do that again based on his career numbers? Probably not. They're not a perfect team, obviously a flawed one, don't have a center, but what if Marchand stays and you actually find a way to address that this summer?
Yeah, or he goes to.
You mean to tell me that the Bruins can't bounce back and be a playoff team next year?
No, I think if he wants one more ring, it's not happening there.
Well, okay, but you could get traded to Edmonton and it's not going to happen there either. Like, who knows? Maybe, but I'm looking at it going, I'd rather stay here, a place where I'm comfortable for relatively the same amount of money, and see if I can get this team back on the rails.
Everyone has different motivation, right? At that point of your life.
Yeah.
He's also already won a cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that sort of leads us into the one we all want, which is Sid. But
oh my God, I'm hanging up. I can't even do this
today. Storybook. That's all.
Jack's pushing this narrative on us.
He's a Penguins guy. He's given his blessing. He says he'd allow it.
And it'll only help the Penguins.
That's it. We should just take our trade proposals from Jack now.
Yeah, I'm in. More exciting than
just kind of the last one for me. I was going to ask about Vegas, but how do you ever know? It just feels like they're always the shark lurking in the shallow water, waiting to attack. But who are you keeping an eye on, or what are you hearing as far as teams? Watch for Team X on Friday to maybe make a splash.
I can never rule out the Golden Knights from doing something wild. They're in on every shiny toy and object in the league, and it's part of the reason which makes them so compelling and a team you can never take your eye off of. I'll say this though, as the Los Angeles Kings are staring down a potential 4th consecutive first round matchup, giving Calgary Flames nightmares of what it was like to go up against the Oilers in the 80s, just trying to get out of your own damn division.
They beat them.
That I look at LA as like, hey, if Mikko Rantanen is actually on the move, if you're LA, you've got to move heaven and earth, even knowing that he might not commit to you and might not re-sign there. Rob Blake's teams have won exactly 0 playoff rounds since he's been the GM over 8 years. I know there was a rebuild involved there, but you've got Kopitar having an all-world season. You've got your center depth. Doughty's back. You think you solved a little bit of your goaltending issues. You either got to break through or pack it in. And I would look long and hard if Rantanen's available, at LA being the team that might emerge from the rubble to get him.
Love that.
Nice. Frank, we'll be watching on Friday. Appreciate you getting on here with us today. I know we can hear your phone going crazy as it must on a week like this, but we appreciate you.
Yeah. See you guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Frank Seravalli on the Insider Hotline, a presentation of Crystal Waters Plumbing and Heating.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.